Welcome to the EXP Group, one of the leading providers of business training solutions. Please enjoy this presentation and visit us on the web at www.theexpgroup.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to this EXP video course for ACCA Paper P3. ACCA Paper P3 Business Analysis. Now, this course is going to be prepared using the Express Notes. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you go to our website www.theexpgroup.com and download a copy of our free Express Notes. I'm on page 2 of the Express Notes now, and this will just give you an overview, a flavour of the areas we're going to cover during this course. The contents page. Let's just run through a few of the things here. Chapter 1, the first chapter, the strategic position of an organisation. This will be introducing us to the concept of strategy, introducing us to a number of key strategic models, things such as the rational model, for example. Chapter 2, we'll be looking at the environment and the competitive forces behind it. Things such as pestle analysis, Porter's 5 forces, will be introduced to models like this. The next chapter, marketing and the value of goods and services, identifies some of the key areas of marketing that we need to know within the syllabus. Chapter 4, internal resources and stakeholders. So for the first time we're introduced to an important concept of stakeholders. Stakeholders are people that have an interest in the business. But we'll go through this in more detail later on. We then identify what choices, what strategic choices are available to an organisation. Next, what action can they take? Moving on, chapter 7, we look at IT, information technology. Now, one thing I'll just mention here, a number of students are often a bit concerned about information technology. It's important to note that it is a strategy examination. It is not an information technology exam. So you have to have an awareness of how IT is used within business, but you don't need to know the technical IT areas such as coding, for example. Chapter 8 then has a look at quality. Introduces us to items such as TQM, Total Quality Management. Chapter 9, project management. How do we manage projects? Chapter 10, looking at financial analysis and people. So that gives us really a very much an overview of what we're going to be covering in this course. Paper P3 ACCA Business Analysis. In this video, we're going to be having a look at Chapter 1 of the Express Notes. So make sure you have Chapter 1 open in front of you before we carry on. This talks about the strategic position of an organisation, and what it does, it gives an overview of what we mean by strategy. It also introduces us to a number of key strategic models we must have an awareness of. First of all, though, if you look on page 7 of the notes, you'll see a word cloud. Now, what a word cloud is, it highlights the words that are included within this chapter. And the bigger the word in the cloud, the more importance, the more use it has within the chapter. As you can see from this word cloud, strategy, strategic, strategies are quite prominent here. It's all about strategy and the models. So, going through the big picture. This chapter provides us with a number of key definitions, as well as an introduction to some of the main strategic models. Now, first one, and you don't need to learn this off by heart. It's not important to learn it off by heart, but it points out some useful things for us to remember. I'll read it out. Strategy. Now, obviously, there's various definitions, but a straightforward one is Strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a particular goal. So, what we're talking about here is strategy is a plan of action. We've got a plan and it's based around action. It's based around the future. It's based around what we're going to do. Designed to achieve a particular goal. Here's the first question to ask yourself. What do we mean by a particular goal? What goal will the organisation have? The answer to that is it depends. There are a variety of different goals. Most of us will think of organisation or companies wanting to achieve profit. Profit could be a valuable goal. Profit. But what about if it's a not-for-profit organisation, if it's a charity, for example? Then it probably wouldn't be profit that is the goal. So it really does depend here. So we have to decide what the particular goal is on the basis of who the stakeholders are. And we'll look at that in a later chapter about stakeholders. We look at the next page, the top of page 8. This introduces us to strategic planning. And again, I'll read through and highlight some of the key points here. Strategic planning, an organisation's process for ascertaining the strategy it should adopt, taking into account what they want to do, again highlighting what are their goals, how they are going to do it, and what resources they will need. Here's another question. What do we mean by resources? What resources are we talking about? What resources does an organisation or a company have? Again, most people will think money. Money is a key resource. But don't forget there's manpower as well, machinery, various other things we're going to be looking at. What are the key resources? Strategic planning covers where the organisation is planning on going, impacts on the whole organisation, and involves the long-term view. Now, another question. What do we mean by the long term? What is the definition of long term? As accountants, we tend to assume that a long term is, for example, anything over 1 year. Short term, less than 1 year. Long term, over 1 year. Or it could be over 5 years. Now, again, in paper P3 and strategy, it all depends. The definition of long term, it depends really. I've said here in the notes, for example, the long term is different when comparing the airline industry and the fashion industry. So the long term, for example, if you imagine Airbus, the long term for Airbus, one of the big international airlines, is a long term, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. What about in the fashion industry? Armani, for example, one of the fashion houses, the fashion chains, the long term for them would be relatively short. So the key thing here when we're looking at strategic planning, it involves what the organisation wants to do, how they're going to do it, what resources will they need. It covers the whole of the organisation and involves the long term. But remember, the long term does differ on a case-by-case basis. The next thing to look at on this page is really just highlighting some terminology here, known as a strategy hierarchy. It introduces us to corporate, business, and functional strategy. Functional is sometimes known as operational strategy. So you have corporate, business, and functional. Let's have a quick look at these one at a time. Corporate strategy. Now, corporate strategy covers the big view of the organisation. It tells us what business or businesses should we be in. So, for example, if you think of British Airways, their corporate strategy is in the airline industry, in the travel business. They don't do consultancy, for example. Now compare that with a big four accounting firm. Their corporate strategy is consultancy. They're in a consulting business. They're not in the travel industry, for example. So corporate strategy covers what business or businesses should we be in. The next layer down is business strategy. Now, business strategy introduces us to something known as a SBU, Strategic Business Units. The business strategy is how an organization approaches the market. Corporate strategy tells us what market the business should be in, and business strategy tells us how they are going to attack the market. They separate themselves into SBUs and then approach the market by SBUs, Strategic Business Units. If you consider the situation of an accounting company, for example, the corporate strategy is saying the accounting company, the business they're in, is that of consulting. The business strategy could be that the accounting company decides to attack the market by way of SBUs, which SBUs could be auditing, could be taxation, could be corporate finance. Now the next one down, functional or operational strategy. And this covers more of the day-to-day running of the business. So we introduce things such as marketing, IT, HRM, human resource management. And all of these should support the business strategy. So what is important when we look at these three levels is that they all support each other. So the corporate strategy, the big picture. Business strategy introduces SBUs, and the functional strategy introduces the more day-to-day running of things.